Trish and Rob McGregor welcome you to a place where all kinds of phenomena flourish. Voices whisper ancient secrets, signs and symbols are abundant. UFOs, ETs, ghosts, and even the dead move about freely. Here we meet authors, researchers, and investigators of the mysterious, the strange, and of the inexplicable anomalies that surround us. Step out of the everyday world and take a journey into the mystical underground. Okay, and if you're ready, we'll start in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Mystical Underground. Thank you for joining us. This is Trish McGregor and our tech magician producer, John Posey. Rob is feeling under the weather, so he's absent. You can go to themysticalunderground.com where we make regular blog posts and where you can find out about our books. Our most recent nonfiction book is The Shift, Reports from the Mystical Underground. My latest novel is White Crows, and Rob's latest novel is Blue Bus. Candice M. Sanderson, our guest today, lives in Naples, Florida, across the state from us. Her life changed in a 10-minute period of time in August 2013, when she began to receive information from messengers from otherworldly sources. When her training as a psychologist failed to explain these events, she reluctantly followed the breadcrumbs down a path which resulted in extraordinary adventures into the unknown. The reluctant messenger and reluctant messenger returns chronicle her expedition across the vast expanse of universal consciousness that led to new truths about life that she thought she had known so well. And she's also written several shorter books, including Stampede and Close Encounters. Welcome. It's so good to see you again, Candice.
Oh, well, thank you. It's so good to be back. It's funny when you do an interview with someone, even though it's over Zoom or something, but knowing that you're just right across the state from me makes me feel even closer to you. So this is
I know,
great.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. It's good to be back.
Now, how long have you lived in Naples?
I have lived here since the early 90s. It was like, I think, 1992. So I've been here long enough where it is definitely my home now.
Is it changing the way the East Coast is with an influx of more people?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But, as that happens, I just bring my world a little bit closer. I just stay closer at home. I pretend it doesn't happen.
Okay. Here's before you began having these astonishing experiences, which began in 2013, I think you'd already ventured to the Monroe Institute in Virginia, where they explore OBEs, right? So do you think that what happened to you there triggered the events that followed with your otherworldly stuff?
I don't really think that's what happened. Trish is like, I know that's what happened. It was absolutely, it was definite. It was absolutely the Monroe Institute. Now, a little bit of background, I was a psychologist, which meant I had a very pragmatic life. I believed only what my physical senses measured. I was interested in these kinds of things, these psychic phenomena, out-of-body experiences, but I had no skills at all. But I was curious. But I had this tipping point when I was at one of the programs with Monroe. And there is that direct line that you can, connect all the dots to. When this happened to me, then that happened to me. And it was all Monroe. It was actually a lifeline.
Which program was it?
Okay, I was just going to say it was a lifeline program. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I'm familiar with their programs. I haven't been to any, but I know Nancy McMonagle. So,
oh, excellent. Well, the Lifeline program is where you go and you do these soul rescues or you do retrievals. Now, back then, I didn't really think that was a thing. Are you serious? You're actually going to retrieve real people who have died and you help them to the other side? It's like, no, that's nonsense. I thought that maybe what you were doing is retrieving aspects of yourself. And I thought I could understand that. But, I didn't care. But the reason I didn't care Trish, is because I didn't go to Lifeline for that program. It was a prerequisite for another program. So I really didn't care. Okay. But, that's what's so interesting about this. That actually worked in my favor. So I'm attending a program that I don't care about. I'm attending a program where there's no performance anxiety. I don't care if I retrieve anyone. I don't even know if it's true. So going in with that set of whatever happens, actually worked in my favor.
You were open.
I was open. And not tied to the outcome whatsoever. But I remember our first session. What we're trying to do is they told you to try to get newcomers, people who have recently passed, because they're easier to reach. And I thought, yeah, right. And, I'm listening and there's all of the meditations are over these beautiful, headphones, and they're very well guided. And I'm thinking, well, I got nothing, nothing's happening. And it didn't surprise me. I mean, I was interested in this. Other people had skills I didn't, but it's like, okay. Then something really weird happened. All of a sudden, I decided to reach outside of where I was, and we use something that's called a check unit. It looks like a sleeping berth on a train. I reached outside and fumbled for my phone. I brought my phone in, turned it on, and found my recording app, and I hit record. I don't know why I did that. And out of the blue, I started talking. I said a man's name, first and last name, Robert. I won't say his last name, but his last name is 3 syllables. It's not an odd name, but I don't know anyone by that name. Yeah. And then I said, Topeka, Kansas. I've never been there. And then I said the word Jackson. And I don't know why, but I just knew that Jackson was not a family name. I didn't know what it was. Now, the psychologist in me takes over and says, ha, 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 look how your brain works. This is something that psychologists, we know is a concept called confabulation. You don't know the answers to something, so your brain just invents details. So I'm thinking, haha, I'm confabulating. Well, at the end of this first session, everyone's called to get together to debrief. And I had my phone in my hand. So I go ahead and Google this man's name, put in Topeka, Kansas, and I put in obituary. And it's like, oh my gosh, there's his obituary. And he had died 3 months ago to the day of the retrieval. And for some reason, that made it even more significant. So I'm thinking, what on earth? How, I just don't understand this. Then as I'm reading his death notice, I see the word Jackson. And I was right. It's like, how did I know this? Jackson was not a family name. It was the county where he lived and also where he worked. And that Jackson was part of the title of the business where he worked. Now, it blew me away. But there was one other thing that I read, and that was a tipping point for me. This man was also a psychologist. Now, I didn't get that, but when I read it, it's like these bells and whistles went off, and I realized, oh, that's why we connected. We shared the energy frequencies, whatever that is, of being a psychologist. And after that, this is a 6-day program, I got more and more validation. I got people's first, middle, and last names, where they lived, sometimes spouses' names. But when I left Lifeline, I changed. I was a different person. Now, I went in not believing this.
Well, did you help him cross over?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Absolutely. And by the end of the program, I was no longer asking for verifiable information. I didn't need it.
Uh,
I was gathering people in groups. I was getting 20 and 30 people at a time
Jeez.
and helping them move over. Even today, when I go through in Monroe, you're talking about like Focus 21 starts that bridge over to 27, which is like the other side, the park. There's all sorts of names for it. But anytime I go there, I stop, I call people to me, spirits to me when they're ready to cross. They'll see me. I call their guides and angels, and we go over and we make that transition. But a couple weeks later, I came home and I started channeling, but it was that lifeline that was a tipping point for me. I didn't believe these things. I knew them to be factual. It changed my life.
Well, now explain to me, okay, you helped them cross over. What's involved in that? I mean, is it a physical thing? I mean, how does it work?
It's probably different for each person who does this. But for me, once I would connect with someone, I just did what seemed natural. Well, first of all, let me back up. When you go to the program, they will say, ask if you can help. They kind of guide you on what to do.
Okay.
But now it's just spontaneous. And I ask for my angels and guides to come in. And it's interesting because once I was doing a retrieval with a little boy. He had passed. He was on a sled and hit a tree and died of a head injury. But he was really hesitant to come with me. And then this dog showed up. And he started petting the dog, and the dog allowed him to come with me. He felt comfortable. And I realized that was an angel or a guide. His guide, probably. And that energy form that we call angels or we call guides morphed into a form that was comfortable for this young boy. But I call in help. I call in help from my angels, from their angels. And sometimes I can actually see them as they transition and go to the other side. It's actually beautiful.
Well, so are they stuck once is that the idea? They're stuck here.
Yes, but with, for example, the reason we started off with newcomers is it's not uncommon when people first cross over to not make it all the way. First of all, a lot of them will stick around for several days if there's some kind of a funeral service or memorial service for them, they're around. But they're trying to get their footing. I mean, this is a new territory for them. So they're ready to go, but they just need a little guidance. Now, later in the program, we started retrieving people who had been there for longer times, and they really were stuck. I think the newcomers, stuck is probably not the correct term. They're just temporarily a little confused.
That dog appearing is interesting. Do you think it was actually the spirit of a dog? Is that possible?
I'm sure it's possible. But the intuitive thought that I had when this occurred or after it occurred and I thought about it was, I got the impression that it was true guidance, like an angel or a guide, maybe even using the form of a dog, perhaps that had been the dog of that child. But I felt like it was like, this child needs something else. He doesn't want to come with a stranger. And of course, we tell our kids, don't go with strangers. But once that dog was there, everything changed. So somehow it was a form of guidance, more so than just the spirit of his dog. But I don't know.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. You never do know, Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so I know you've continued your work with the Monroe Institute. I always say with, your Facebook, off to the Monroe Institute. And I think, I'm jealous. What's it like to spend time there? What other programs have you done?
Oh my goodness. It's probably easier to say what programs I have, I have not done. I've done over 20 programs. And when I go,
Wow.
it's like it is my home away from home. And I'm kind of joking, but maybe not.
Maybe not.
Yeah, it's like I measure my life by what's the next program I'm going to take, that I'm going to attend there. But I've been to so many of them, and each time when I return, I've changed. Now, you go into a program and you're at a certain level. Here's your baseline. So when you go to the program, you're in this beautiful, expansive state. Before you come back, they bring you back down. They ground you so you can go back home. But you never go as low as you were before. You never go to that baseline because you built up. And so program after program, you're building a different way of life. You're building in ways that that you can't get through reading a book. And you reach a tipping point. Or for me, I reached a tipping point. One thing
I'm just curious, was it after the first program where you quit being a school psychologist and started writing?
No, I started writing while I was a psychologist.
Okay.
And I just retired in 2018, and I actually wrote my book and published it. I mean, I'd written it before, but during the few hours that I would have free while working. But like 2 weeks after I retired, I published that first book. So those experiences were ongoing. In fact, what I would do is initially when I started channeling, I was driving to work. I had like a 10-minute.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it's like all of a sudden my world, just opened. But, one thing I really love, Trish, about the Monroe Institute is, this is not going to sound right, but oh well. It's the lazy person's way to meditate. They use, you put on headphones, and Bob Monroe started off and he developed HemiSync. And HemiSync, that's what he patented. It's like layers and layers of binaural beats. And he found that these binaural beats, with a little bit tweaking here and tweaking there, would put people in these expanded states of consciousness. And he tried to keep the woo-woo out of his programming. Now, there was no religion, there was no woo-woo stuff. It was all it was science. So he would he would use these layers, and then he would label these focus levels. So you wouldn't call focus 27 heaven, because that's too religious.
Yeah, that's too religious.
It's focus 27. It's okay to call it the park, but don't call it anything else. But now Monroe Institute has expanded on that. They still use binaural beats, and they layered the binaural beats, but they have something that they call Monroe sound science. So they've added there's like frequency, phase, and amplitude modulation. So it's improved, but it's still the same thing. Once you get that perfect combination, then you have this, targeted sound wave pattern that takes people places. And so as a participant, you don't have to do anything. You put the headphones on, and that's why I say it's a lazy person's way to meditate. Those frequencies actually take you there. You just kick back and relax. It's great.
You don't have to exert any, oh my God, I'm not doing anything right, that kind of thing.
Oh, no, it's perfect. It really is.
Okay, well, that's pretty cool. Recently, you sent us the Stampede. Was it Stampede or was it? No, it was Close Encounters. Tell me about that. That was fascinating. The Stampede was great too, but
oh my goodness, this
the
was
White Buffalo. That was
Yeah, I loved White Buffalo and Stampede. Stampede is interesting. But let me, well, I think they're all interesting. But let me share to you, and you mentioned earlier, I have two large books. One is Reluctant Messenger, which you see behind me. One is The Reluctant Messenger Returns,
Right.
and that's a book more about angels and angelic encounters. And then I started a series of books. And actually, I did this series really just for my family. I wanted to provide tiny little books where I could give them to my granddaughters as like stocking stuffers or whatever. So I actually have 5 books in that. The first 4 are chapters from my first book, but I reworked them. But then the last one in that series, from the Reluctant Messenger series, is something that's brand new. It's called Close Encounters. Now, I went to Monroe. It was actually like May 1st, 2022. And I took a brand new program. This is the first time it was offered. And it was called NDE, so Near Death Experience, NDE Spectrum. And I thought, okay, this is okay. During the very first full day of the program, we had a free flow meditation. Okay, so free flow means they're not guiding you. You're just relaxing. You're listening to the frequencies, and kind of as an afterthought, because you could set an intention on what you wanted to experience, but as a just afterthought, I thought, I think I'll just check in with my guidance team. Well, immediately I started downloading messages. That's not unusual. That's what happens to me. And then the messages change. It started off like really, really poetic. And when it's poetic, I know it's from the muses within. They speak in poetry and prose. The message was like, energy is like like the wind on, an eagle soaring on the wind. Just gorgeous stuff. And then all of a sudden it like stopped, and this robotic message came in. And it's like, whoa, this is a new messenger. What is this? And it was like, all sensors are open and ready for more data or something like that. And I'm thinking, what is this? But I ended up having a close encounter. I was brought up. Now, this is in a meditative state, but there's more to that story in a minute. And I was brought up into this beautiful vortex of light. And I could feel this energy swirling around me. And I move up this and then out this vortex. And I found myself slipping into, you know how you can get a pair of gloves and you put your glove on, it just fits you perfect. I was like slipping, my existence, my awareness was slipping into this leather glove. And I realized it was a personal aircraft. And what I've learned to do since I really started opening up and channeling is I can actually pinpoint my awareness, and I can be in and we all can do this, can be in multiple places at multiple times. So there was part of me who was the experiencer, the one who's feeling this machine that I slip into. One is the observer, one who's watching, and then there's the scribe who's writing down or dictating exactly what's going on. Well, once I'm in this machine, I feel and see my body, and it starts disappearing. And then I actually see these brilliant lights, kind of like if you've ever seen a welder, welder's torch, how bright that light is. That was happening. And if you've ever fried an electrical circuit, like plug in the wrong device with, I've done that before. There's this distinctive smell of like ozone. So all of that happened. And I actually became this flying machine.
Wow.
I go up in this vortex of light, and then all of a sudden I look around and I'm surrounded by 4 beings. There's 2 on each side of me. And I start looking at them. It's like they have grayish, they were aliens, grayish green skin. They had long bony fingers, no fingernails on the tips of their, nails on the tips of their fingers. No mouth that I could see. The sides of their head had these little slits that looked like gills. And of course, those almond-shaped eyes with no pupils. And they started communicating with me telepathically. And they told me that I could refer to them as the Galactic 8. And Trish, I'm thinking, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. I only see 4.
Where are the other ones?
So exactly. So while I'm thinking this, they immediately say, there's 2 at your head and 2 at your feet. It's like,
oh wow.
And then they asked if they could examine me. Now, this is strange for me, and I've had a lot of strange experiences, but I felt okay with this. I mean, I don't know why. They actually told me they were there to protect me and maintain a close energy connection where everything would be safe. And so I said yes. And then I saw this green dot that was floating in my check unit. Now, Trish, I'm actually seeing this with my physical eyes. I'm opening my eyes in my dark check units like I see it. I didn't know it was a laser. It like landed on my jugular notch at the bottom of my chin, and it zipped down my body to my pubic bone, and then I opened up. Now, that sounds terrifying, but it wasn't. It wasn't. I knew that these were very skilled beings. Now, I don't know, maybe they're us in the future. That thought came to mind. I don't really know who they are, but I knew this was like a two-way street. So I asked them, if you see any kind of imbalances in my body, you certainly have my permission
to fix it.
And then
was there any scar?
No, I actually looked to see if I had a scar. It's like, no. I mean, because it was that real. I remember looking to my left, and more of this ship that I was in came into view. And there was a large semicircle of more beings that were watching. And they said they were from a galactic council of light. And that was so strange to me. Now, I've read since then, it's like a lot of people talk about the Galactic Council of Light. Trish, I'd never heard of them. In fact, I cared. It's not that I could care less about having a close encounter. I didn't want to have one. I was actually a little afraid of it. So, like, if you're going to make this up, I would have made up something that would have been more pleasant. It's like, no. But anyway, then I see another green light that comes down, and it goes across me. My eyes are open. And it goes across. So where both those lasers meet, I see this pulsating like a heart. And then later I realized, well, the heart chakra is green. So it's pulsating. And then they told me that this was a homing beacon. And so I would be able to connect with them later. Now, this was so far beyond my comfort zone I didn't know what to think, but I had been channeling, and I've had so many different messages that seemed bizarre that I could then validate. And when we had our gathering afterwards, I told people about it, and I was a little embarrassed too, but it's like, I've just got to tell them. So I did. And then I thought, okay, done, over. I don't have to say anything else. I'm going to get on with the rest of the program.
Did anybody else have something similar? Did anybody else report something similar?
No. But what I found out later, there were a couple people there who were really into like ETs and UAPs. They belonged to Dr. Stephen Greer, and I had heard his name, but didn't really know who he was. They belonged to his CE5 group. And they were telling me, oh, the CE5 close encounter, the fifth kind, uses lasers. Well, to call the aliens in, green lasers. And I'm thinking, green lasers, that's what I had. And they said it was a homing beacon. But there were so many things like that that just blew me away. But anyway, I was ready to just forget about it. This is just too weird for me. Then, a couple of nights later, I'm in my check unit, because you not only sleep there, that's where you listen to the meditations. And in your check unit, they have a little shelf for you to put your headphones, and they're big, bulky headphones, even larger than yours, And I woke up a little bit before 4, and it's like, oh my gosh, my back was killing me. I had rolled over on my headphones. So in that soft space between your left hip and then the bottom of your left rib cage, it's like, it hurts. So I raised up and reached down to grab my headphones to put them on the shelf. There were no headphones there.
Oh God.
I saw with my eyes 3 long greenish gray bony fingers withdrawing from my back.
Wow, that's creepy.
It is very creepy. But I immediately knew I had been with the Galactic 8 and that I was back with them on their ship. And they were actually returning me to the safety of my check unit. It was.
Well, let me ask you, what do you think? What do they want? I mean, what's their purpose in doing this kind of thing?
I just was so curious about this once I got over my fear of what is this. Once I got home, I had a dream with them. And I do a lot of dream work, and I can be lucid in my dreams real frequently. But in this dream, the Galactic 8 came to me. There were like 2 or 3 of them. I saw their full bodies. They turned away from me, and they unzipped the back of their head, like down to their shoulder blades. And as their skin like dropped away, I saw this like conglomeration of just skeletal structures. And then I realized, oh my gosh, they all looked exactly alike. Their almond-shaped eyes had no pupils. And then I realized, that's why. Those are just space suits. The head with those almond-shaped eyes was like a helmet. That spacesuit allowed them to operate in that space where I was, where I had raised my vibrations to be there, and they lowered theirs to be there. And so I asked questions, and they actually told me that they are part of my guidance team. Now, my first book, I have a chapter that's called Cosmic Contacts.
Right.
I talk about, star beings, not people, but spirits or whatever, from Alpha Centauri, from Chiron. We talked about Chiron before, about the Pleiades. But, I never saw those beings. I didn't see them. as aliens. I didn't see anything.
Hmm.
So it's like, I asked them and they said, you weren't ready to see us. You're ready for that now. And so they gave me an opportunity to experience something that I was fearful of. And I'm okay with it. I understand it. And guidance takes many forms, just like the dog that we talked about earlier. What's so strange about a star being who looks like that typical alien? They're part of my guidance team, and I've accepted that.
So the suit covers their skeletal system.
Yes,
right?
Whatever they actually look like. For me, it just looked like bones all just piled together. But that suit is what, just like a spacesuit for,
right?
Our astronauts, allowed them to be in that atmosphere of the moon, for example. Those spacesuits allowed them to be in that shared space where I was, where they had taken me.
Now, have you seen them at home?
No.
When you're not? No.
No. Well, no. What? Other than in the dream state.
Yeah, right.
In the dreams, I did. Yeah.
But I mean, you haven't felt fingers on your back or anything.
No, thank goodness. Thank goodness. Now, I did wake up with a dream once, and in the dream, and I keep a dream journal. I'd have to look it up for the details, but they were telling me I needed to get in touch with a woman, and they gave me her name. She owns a metaphysical shop here in Naples, but she actually runs it. She's moved to another state, Tennessee, actually. So she lives in Tennessee. She visits now and then here in Naples. But they told me I needed to get in touch with her and that I could connect her to them. And it's like, this is crazy. But I know her. I have her phone number. So I thought, you know what? Who cares? So I texted her and I said, you may think this is strange, but, and then I told her. And she told me that she was at Mount Shasta, which I had no idea, at the time. And that Mount Shasta is one of those places where a lot of people go, apparently, to connect with the aliens. And she said, I'm leaving in like 15 or 20 minutes to go up the mountain to meet with the aliens. And so I thought, how interesting. Now, later, she never got back to me to say, oh, we saw the mothership and they took us aboard. I don't know what happened. But sometimes, like me and them returning me to the bed, you may have an experience that you're not ready to see yet. So it might be months later before you can understand it or even acknowledge it. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I'm curious about this because some years ago, a writer friend and I went to a healing workshop with Eric Pearl, I think it was. And he had just developed this hand thing he was a chiropractor, developed that he was inadvertently healing people. So it was in Alabama, I remember. There were a lot of people there. So he said, team up with somebody that you don't know and let's do these hand movements. So I teamed up with a woman next to me. She started doing the hand movements, and all of a sudden, the top of my head blew off, and this beam of light shot through, freaked me out, shot through the ceiling, and at the top, I saw 3 aliens peering down. And I said, well, hey, guys, this is interesting. And it was like they were just, they were curious about what was going on. So I thought that was pretty cool. Then a few years later, during one of the hurricanes, I was laying in bed. Meg was asleep. Rob was asleep. All the animals were asleep. I was laying there listening to the wind and thinking, what am I going to do if something blows off here? And I finally fell asleep. But as I was falling asleep, I saw them again. And it was through the same column of light. And they peered down. And it was like a comforting thing. And they said, now you can go to sleep. I woke up 4 hours later and the hurricane was gone. But I haven't seen them since, so I want them to come back. What do I do?
You bring up so many really good points where, first of all, they are there. You see them as comforting. I was afraid of them, but as I had my experience, I did feel comfortable. And later learning they were part of my guidance team, is like, okay. So now I can look back at, okay, they took me to their ship and I was asleep and I didn't remember it. And it's like, I'm okay with that. But as you're falling asleep, you see that, you look up and there they are. Well, it kind of reminds me of that column of light that they took me up in. But you're in that magical space, Trish, that twilight where you're not asleep yet,
right?
But you're almost there, and you found that just that magical space where that door could open. So I would think, first of all, knowing that they are still connected to you is strong and is very powerful. Continue to ask for that. Okay. Ask for them to make themselves known. And one way to do that, are you right-handed?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Use your dominant hand, your right hand. This is a trick I learned at Monroe. Before you go to bed at night, just use a couple of fingers, tap your third eye, and you say, I want my alien friends or whatever to come to me. And then you let that go. That's the key, because a lot of times if we want something, wanting means you're lacking, you don't have it, so you don't want to draw in more lack. So you say, actually you should say it like, I will meet with my aliens tonight. Okay. Let that thought go and then just open to it. Now you bring up something that's really interesting to me, because that twilight area, when that happens to me, it happens, right before I go to sleep, or like when you're waking up. But also, if I'm in a very deep meditation, I start having hypnagogic images. Now, for listeners who may not know what that is, that's, with your eyes closed. Well, actually, they can be open, but in a dark space, these swirls of energy and color come in. When I had my close encounter, there were transitions that I went through. And each time I went through a transition, things became much clearer. I started understanding the communication, telepathic communication, no longer just a word here or there, but I was understanding total concepts. And then my vision cleared where I could see more of the ship, and I saw the the Galactic Council of Light. But every time I had that transition, these hypnagogic images came. And they were so, yes. And then I would transition. That happened 2 or 3 times. Now, this is something that when you're ready to, put this video out, I'm going to send you and John, wonderful John here, I'm going to send you a couple pictures. When I was at Monroe with my close encounter, I love taking orb photography, and I've sent you pictures of orbs before. They're really cool. But I would go out in the middle of the night, not the middle of the night, but it would be dark, and I would just snap pictures. I'm not looking at anything. I'm just snapping pictures. Well, a couple of days later, I uploaded those pictures to my laptop, and I saw this beautiful, and by far the most interesting picture I've ever taken in my life, but this beautiful swirl of lilac and purple mist. It's floating above the ground. And when you zoom in at the bottom, you can actually see a footprint. You can see its shadow. It's like, how can a purple mist create a shadow? And because that purple mist, those hypnagogic images, just like that, were such a key part of my transition, it's like, this has got to mean something. And now you're bringing up, that's when you see them, is when you're in that magical, mystical space where you're not in one dimension or the next. And actually,
you're in between.
And actually what we can learn to do is stretch that out. And I think that is why I have the experience with this now. This is why I have some of these experiences. So more than likely, I'm just making this up right now because it makes sense to me. As that hypnagogic image came, I stretched it and then moved more of my awareness into it, which then allowed for a larger view. You know, I no longer had to see that. Yeah.
I'm also going to try the tapping. I like that.
Well, can I ask a question real quick? So I've certainly been seeing some links, some news stories over the last month or two about some. Seems like there's a new round of experimentation going on with psychedelics. Are psychedelics just a shortcut to get into that state of mind, to get the brain chemistry in the right state to have some of these experiences, in your opinion?
Yeah. I mean, with me, I was able to get into this experience through Monroe, but there's actually many ways that you could do this. Okay. And one is using native plant medicine. You know,
like psilocybin.
Some people do this just through prayer. You know, let me share something with you. The messengers have told me, for example, they've taught me about consciousness and how consciousness works. And there's a couple concepts that I want to quickly explain. And then, John, this will kind of address some of the things you're talking about. Well, first of all, there's two things. I want to talk about time, and I want to talk about something my messengers have told me is called the POE, point of existence. Okay? The point of existence is just a way of visualizing consciousness. But what is consciousness? It's awareness. That's it. It's just awareness. But for most of us as human beings, we think that we are our physical bodies. My hand hurts. My foot hurts. My hair looks great today. It's my. Well, the reason we think we are our physical bodies is because our POE, point of consciousness, is like a teeny tiny dot. It's like a particle that's deeply embedded within us. So we think that we are our physical bodies. Okay, now let's look at time. I always thought that time was you go from event A to event B, and you look at your POE, your point of existence, and you travel along that, from A to B. It's linear, it's one direction, it's logical, it's straight like an arrow, it's sequential, and time marches forward only. Well, the messengers, because some of them come in and just give me all these beautiful lessons, and they give them in such a way it's so easy to understand. The messengers say, no, time's not like that. It's like a sine wave. So it is a curvy, wavy sine wave. So now let's look at our point of existence, that little dot. And now we're traveling around. And so from event A to event B, it's just gotten a little bit more complicated. So time's not so straightforward. It's a little fluid. Now, John, this is where we introduce expanded awareness. How do you get into expanded awareness? I went to Monroe Institute. I did that lazy thing of just listening and letting the frequencies take me. Some people have prayer. A lot of people, and I don't know if more people are doing this or they're just talking about it, but they're using sacred ceremonies. They're using plant-based medicines that catapult them quickly into this state. You can also use drumming. But now, when you do that, let's look at that POE, that point of existence. It changes. It's no longer a dot. It morphs into a circle, a sphere, a three-dimensional globe of life force energy. Okay? It's not in the body. It's this big. So let's take a look at this point of existence and let's superimpose it on that sine wave. All of a sudden, you go from here to here. So you have all of this sine wave that is now within your field of awareness. So in that state, and this just makes such sense to me, you can now perceive the past. And Trish, we're not talking about 2 weeks ago. It could be 2 lifetimes ago. You can also perceive the possibilities of the future. And the future, and I say possibilities because we control our future 1 nanosecond at a time, but you can look at the probabilities of what might occur. So
well, that would explain precognition, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And it all comes from an altered state. It's just how you achieve that and how you sync up with that, right? So,
yes,
I think,
yes.
Sounds like.
That's exactly right. Now, what I like doing, this is just the way I learned, was through Monroe, and it was slow and it was steady. But every time you experience this state, and I mean, I don't know about doing mushrooms every day. I don't know how that part would work, but like I can use the Monroe app and listen to these meditations all the time. But every time you're in that state of expansion, you come back, just like I did from the programs at Monroe, changed. You start, there's an entrainment that occurs where you start seeing yourself as that field of energy. Right. You expand greater and greater. You visit galaxies. You are just so expansive. But it starts to change your makeup. And then the beauty of it is once you return and this was a little challenging for me, was learning how to integrate it. So it's great to have these wonderful experiences, but if I come back to my 3D life and I still go to work and I complain and fuss and all that, it's like, I'm not learning a lot. But once you start to integrate, your vision of the world and of you changes. You are not your physical body. You are so much more than what life is. I mean, it's really easy to think of ourselves as, I'm not important. Who am I? I mean, I'm just this little speck of nothing. Well, yeah, of course you are. I am too. We all are. But when you look at the world through the lens of energy and you start looking at consciousness, and when you expand, you realize you are consciousness. You are unity. You are all that is. Now, the messengers have shown me that consciousness, for example, think of it as a huge machine with millions and millions of moving parts. Let's say that you just decide to close your eyes and you just reach in that machine and you pull out a cog or a bolt or a screw. Well, guess what happens to that beautiful machine of consciousness? It breaks down. So that's how we are important. We may think that we are meaningless, but no, we are all that is. And our little consciousness matters to the functioning of everything. The messengers, I'm sorry, I'm talking so much, but the messengers.
No, Candice, you're still a psychologist. That's what I love.
well, and
you're still explaining stuff.
Well, and one thing I wanted to throw in, and by the way, just a disclaimer for YouTube, we're not promoting the use of psychedelics here, but some of the articles I've been reading lately about people participating in these group experiences where it is really, like you said, native plant based experiences, but
sacred ceremony.
And they have, and I mean, they basically what would have been called previously probably would have been called a shaman, but is a coach, is called a coach these days, to help integrate the experience once you come out of it, so that you can actually appreciate what you've experienced and continue and let that, anyways. I'm rambling.
And use it in your life.
And use it in your life. Yes.
Yeah.
Incorporate it.
That's
Incorporate
cool.
it. That's the word.
Incorporate it. Yeah.
Incorporation.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's the key. It's like, why go to school? Why go to college and then come home and don't do anything with it? Once you have access to some of these beautiful dimensions, regardless of how you got there, bring it back with you, learn from it. The messengers tell me about something called the silent guru. Okay, there's a lot of gurus out there, but the silent guru, that's the person you pass on the street who smiles at you. They may not write books or teach classes or, be influencers, but they share their energy field with you, and you change because of that. We can all bring back wisdom when we realize that we are not these individual particles in a physical body. We are all that is, and what we do can change everyone. I mean, we look at the future, what's it going to bring? It comes back to one by one, what actions do we choose? And, it's just, I don't know. I love talking
Candice,
about
you need to write some more books.
Right?
This is great. Okay, I have one more question because I see we're kind of running out of time here. But what's the messenger's message about the future, just collectively for humanity?
Okay, actually, for several years, but I didn't really get it at the time. They were talking about a shift. Okay, a shift with Gaia, which is the spirit of Mother Earth. In fact, they gave me messages about Gaia, told me how to spell it. I mean, when I get the messages, it's almost like dictation. If I make a mistake, they correct me, but they talked about Gaia. And at that time, I didn't even know what Gaia was, but that's the spirit of Mother Earth. But there is this veil of forgetfulness, so that when we come to Earth, we can't just access those other realms. Okay, but our Earth is transitioning. And as she transitions, what happens is that veil of forgetfulness is thinning. Now, Mother Earth had an option. She could bring us, humanity, along with her as she makes this transition, or she could choose not to. Well, luckily for us, she chose to bring us along. And so what's happening as she is transitioning to higher vibrational frequencies, she's starting to go through that veil. That is why people like me, trained psychologists who had no skill whatsoever in being psychic, all of a sudden, I started receiving messages. I started having visions. I started connecting with the field of energy that surrounds all of us. So when we look in terms of the future, our future depends on us. And that sounds like, yeah. But it really does. It's us individually. We're not insignificant. Think of that machine of consciousness. And as we plan our life, and we do plan our life, we plan our life 1 nanosecond at a time, we can choose how we're going to live. The messengers have given me a formula, TEA, thoughts, energy, action. We have a thought, and that thought is fueled by energy. And depending on the energy that we use, that action will manifest one way or the other. If we say we're going to do something and we use the energy of doubt, we can't do that, then it's going to manifest that, the doubt. So when we realize everything is energy and we can plan our life, if we choose to fuel our thoughts with high vibrational frequencies, love, gratitude, compassion, caring, then we are raising our vibrations. Then we become that silent guru. The more people that do that, the more that we start planning a life of peace
Right.
and compassion and unity.
Hmm.
There
Yeah.
will be a tipping point.
And I kind of feel like maybe that's why paradigm busters are appearing. People who could do things that we don't ordinarily, at least in the past, saw. People who are using their energy in different ways.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Okay, this is so cool.
Well, this reminds me, I know we didn't get a chance to talk about Stampede. Maybe we'll do that another time. But
yeah,
I remember this native story. I think it was Cherokee. It was a grandfather talking to his grandson. He said, every person has two wolves. One is like angry and hostile and growls all the time. And the other one is loving and compassionate and caring. And the grandson looks and he says, but Granddad, which one wins? Because they're always in constant battle. And he said, the one you feed.
That's great. That's so true.
When we know that, when we realize choosing our energy, who we want to give, who we want to feed is what will guide our future. That was really so profound.
That's great. Now, Candice, what does your family think about what you're doing? I'm just curious.
Well,
are they in awe? I mean, do they get it?
Okay. My daughter, for example, she's an administrator in a school setting, and she also is she used to do some coaching, and she's actually an athletic director. But I remember a few years ago, because I can do energy healing, I do Reiki, that can be long distance, and she wouldn't necessarily embrace, oh, Mom, blah blah blah. But then if she had like a student who had an injury, she would say, oh, Mom, can you do a little long distance Reiki on this person? So when it was really convenient, she would ask for my assistance. Now, my grandkids, they are 7 and 11 now. And, that book Stampede talks about Shalane, the youngest one, actually, when my daughter was pregnant with her. But when they come over and spend the night, I have taught them things that I'm pretty sure their other grandmother doesn't teach them. They come over, we shut down the hurricane shutters, it's completely dark, and we get out light bulbs. I have these little fluorescent light bulbs, like for a garage, and we light them with our hands. I teach them to use energy. I teach them to protect themselves in a bubble of light. I teach them some of the skills that I'd learned through my connections with the messengers. And I know that they are growing up very differently than I did at that age.
I bet they love coming to your house.
Well, I can say it's quite different than probably any other kid in their class.
I think that's great. Okay, tell people where they can get in touch with you and your website, and all that good stuff.
Well, the website is Candice, that's with an I, CANDICE, Sanderson.com. And they can find everything there. I mean, I've got a YouTube channel that has like 185 or 190 short videos on them. And these are all videos where I'm trying to share what I know. I mean, Trish, I've had people ask me, to come and teach a class or to do things. It's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to charge people for what I know. I want them to be able to access my knowledge. Right. And so that's why I do my YouTube channel, but they can find, just through my website, they can find that.
Okay.
And then on Amazon, they can just look up my name or The Reluctant Messenger, and they'll see those
And
things.
The books are great for all you people who are readers. They're terrific. They take you into other worlds for sure. Candice, thank you. John, when's this coming up?
We'll link to the website and on the podcast stream and the YouTube post, and we hope to have this out later today. So
okay. So we'll send it to you, Candice.
Yeah. Thanks for joining the Mystical Underground. Visit www.themysticalunderground.com for the latest blog post and book info. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Listen to the podcast at podcast.themysticalunderground.com. Follow Trish and Rob on Instagram at Trish and Rob McGregor. Follow us on Twitter at The Mystic Cast. Send email to podcast@themysticalunderground.com. And until next week, thank you for listening and stay mystical.